It is that time of year, time for us to look back at what came out in the previous year and try to figure out what was the best of the best. What were the 10 greatest things you could have watched from anime that came out in 2023. Now, despite me saying that, I will not claim to have every single best show on this list, especially because all of this is subjective and you may have a completely different set of 10 shows that you think are the best. These are just the ones that I overall, based on what I have seen at the moment of recording, which is most of the stuff that I think I will care about from 2023, though that is subject to change, and this list is subject to change over the years as well. But this is just what I think are the 10 best shows that I have seen from 2023 as of this moment. Without any further ado, let's get on to the list. Tomo-chan as a Girl, I believe I said was my favorite show from the winter season. I'd say that still holds true, even now. I think the show did a lot right. Even though it is, to an extent, a gimmick show and that it has this hook, and that's the main appeal, this idea that, oh, here is Tomo, and she is very much so a tomboy, and to the point that her love interest thought at some point in the past that she was a guy, and her attempt to try and make herself seem more feminine in order to win his heart. It's the type of show that could have gotten old very quickly, but it doesn't. I think that this is a show that's elevated beyond what it easily could have been for a couple of reasons. One, it is a full adaptation. We get a conclusion, and it is a satisfying conclusion. All of the characters get meaningful time in the spotlight, both Tomo and June, as well as all of the supporting characters as well. I really feel like this is a show where even characters who are not the main focus get their time in the spotlight. Misuzu, Carol, everyone. And the fact that they all feel like fleshed out characters is really a testament, because this easily could have been like many shows where the supporting characters are just kind of there. They're filling a supporting role and they don't really get their time to feel fleshed out. Tomo-chan goes the extra mile to make that happen. This is a show where, despite the gimmick, the romance feels very genuine and very believable, and you definitely want to see these characters end up together by the end. It's a show that goes beyond its premise and is able to make a very satisfying, short, but contentful watch. Definitely give it a chance if you didn't. Pluto was a show that, if you've been watching the channel, you know that I was incredibly hyped up for. Probably too hyped up for, if I'm honest. I was expecting way too much, simply because it is Naoki Urasawa. It's an adaptation of his manga, which in of itself is sort of like an adaptation of an Astro Boy arc, but just done in a much darker way. This is something that had been announced back in like 2017. We'd been waiting years for it, and most of us thought this thing was canceled. For it to actually happen, to be on Netflix, to get hour-long episodes, to be a full adaptation, everything was lining up perfectly for this. And I do think that this is a really good show. Obviously, if it wasn't, I wouldn't be talking about it. I just do think that my expectations were way too high. I expected this to be on the same level as Monster, and I really should not have. And I think if you expect that at yourself, you will probably be disappointed, because this is not on the level of Monster. That's not to say you won't get a lot of what you liked out of Monster in this. You get that sort of signature Urasawa style where you have a lot of supporting characters who at first don't seem relevant, and you kind of wonder, why are we focusing on them, only for them to actually be really relevant and have an important role in the story. Urasawa has a great skill with making you care about characters you, on the surface, probably shouldn't care about. It really is a testament to his strength as a writer. And there are entire sections of episodes that are focused on characters who really are only present in that section, but are still able to leave a massive impact on you as the viewer. Pluto was also able to just take a mystery and have one that allows everything to tie in some way, even if at first you kind of think, oh, it's been a few episodes since they mentioned this, are they going to forget about it? Like, no, everything gets tied in. And for the most part, it results in a very satisfying ending. But I do want to emphasize, for the most part, because there are elements of Pluto's ending that I do think feel unnecessary. If you've seen the show, you know what I mean. It unfortunately has the kind of ending where you are inevitably, unless you've already experienced the story through the source material potentially, you are going to have to look up what happened in the ending, because of a particular character who is introduced relatively late into the show and ends up being presented as much more important than you ever would have thought. And I'm going to try not to go into super big spoilers on this, but that particular character, and you know who I'm talking about if you've seen the show, in my opinion, should not have even been there. It should have been completely excised from the story. It seems very unnecessary to have this particular character be involved. I don't think it was needed necessarily for Pluto's themes to work, and I also think it just makes things a little too convoluted. And again, like, if you need to go and look something up because of this one character who feels tacked on in the first place, that's not really a good sign. It's not a good thing to have your show end in a weird way like that. So that is probably my biggest complaint with the show, and it does, I think, deflate things a little bit. But for the most part, if you like Urasawa's style, you're going to like Pluto. Just don't go in expecting it to be on the level of Monster, because it isn't. If I'm being honest, it just isn't. But that doesn't mean it isn't a good show. And I'm still very, very grateful that this finally got made after so many years of wondering if it ever would. We also had the third season, or second season, part 2 of The Devil is a Part-Timer, which I, for one, really enjoyed. I know a lot of people checked out of the show after season 2 because they didn't like the animation quality because of the new studio. First of all, I do think the animation has improved quite a bit in season 3 compared to season 2. But I also think if you enjoy these characters and you enjoy the world and the story, you need to give these seasons a shot, because they do expand on things in a really good way. I enjoy watching these characters. I enjoy seeing this world fleshed out more. I enjoy seeing where the story is going. Yes, it's a shame the animation quality wasn't better, but I think too many people have completely thrown away any idea of watching these seasons because they heard the animation wasn't good. I think you are doing yourself a disservice if you were a fan of season 1 to not watch the subsequent season. My only complaint really for season 3 would be not everything is resolved by the end, and it's not supposed to be, but if we don't get another season, because as of time of recording we don't have anything announced, I'm going to be a little concerned. Otherwise, I was happy with this season. I was happy with season 2, and I implore you to give them a chance if you haven't. Spy Family also got another season this year. I think is still very much so living up to the hype it initially had. I thought this season was a lot of fun, especially the main arc. Well, I'd say maybe the first couple episodes of the show before we get into said arc on the cruise ship are a little slow. Once it gets into that arc, and even after it's done, the last few episodes of the season, which are standalone, I think the show really is back in its prime. If you thought maybe in like the second half of season 1 that the show was not quite living up to the same strengths it had early on, I think it proves its strengths again and again throughout this second season, in terms of its action, in terms of its heartwarming moments, in terms of exploring its main trio of characters. It does a fantastic job, and I think Spy Family continues to be a fantastic series, and one that I hope we continue to get more of as the years go by. A show that I think a lot of people lost track of in the absolutely gargantuan season of spring 2023 was Insomniacs After School. Despite the fact that it had a solid amount of hype going into it before it came out, I feel like everyone just kind of stopped talking about the show, and I don't quite know why, other than it just kind of got lost in the weeds with all these other crazy popular shows that came out in that season. I want to really, really recommend this show to anyone who either didn't watch it or didn't give it enough of a chance. This is such a heartwarming and charming series. It has a solid romance, really, really relatable characters, even if you haven't experienced insomnia yourself. Characters who are dealing with real, relatable issues, even if you can't relate to them 100%. Characters who you can understand, characters who really do genuinely struggle and are afraid, in a sense, to go to sleep because of what might come in the next day, in the future, and have to try and overcome that and form this really incredibly strong bond with each other that is just a joy to watch grow and develop. It's also just a really beautiful show. Like, it's not on the level of like Inuyasha or anything with its backgrounds and its scenery, but it definitely has a lot of really, really nice moments just being outside looking at, astronomical phenomena. It's a show that you can tell a lot of care was put into, and I really hope people give it a chance if they didn't, because they are missing out on quite the gem. I've talked about The Dangers in My Heart a decent amount on the channel before in various different videos, and it's a really fantastic series. The romance is likable and charming and believable. The characters do have their own flaws that they need to overcome, so neither one of them feels perfect, and ultimately it's just a really charming, cute, adorable time. If you have been missing romance anime of this variety, then you owe it to yourself to check this show out. Do not worry about the way its synopsis is described, because it really does not do in any way a good job of describing what the actual show is. I know basically everybody got fooled by that synopsis into thinking the show was going to be really cringy and the main character was going to be really unlikable, and it's not. It is not like that whatsoever, beyond like maybe the first episode. So give this show a shot, because it is one of the best romance anime we have gotten in a long time. The Ancient Magus Bride finally got its second season this year. It was split into 2 core, but my god, we were waiting a long time for this, and understandably so, because when the first season finished up in 2018, it actually caught up to the source material, so we needed to wait for there to be enough material for this, and unfortunately, from what I understand, we've now once again caught up to the source material, which is unfortunate because we really do need more seasons, but the second season on its own is interesting. It does change quite a bit about the standard formula by moving to a new setting in the college, introducing a whole bunch of new characters, most of which, are just kind of there, but a number of them are main players in the story, resulting in most of the supporting cast from season 1 only kind of being around here and there, which is an interesting choice. I do think that a good chunk of the new characters are likable. Some of them definitely didn't get as much focus as I wish they did, but we'll have to see what happens with them in the future. It is difficult to judge season 2 simply because while a number of plot points introduced are resolved, there are still a good chunk that were brought up in this season that are very intentionally not resolved so that they can be followed up on in another season. On top of having a lot of plot points from season 1 that were unresolved, and a very big and noteworthy tease in the last episode of season 2 as to what would be coming up in the future. There's a lot that really needs to be developed in the future, and if we really are caught up to the source material, then it's sad that we might have to wait like another 5 years to even see any of these plot points get touched on. That being said, what we got here I do think is likable. We are still following Chisei's journey in trying to not be so willing to sacrifice herself so easily. We also do get a decent amount of focus for Elias on just trying to understand humans better. I will say there's not as much of an interaction between him and Chisei as I wish there were, especially compared to season 1. Like, their dynamic doesn't really grow in this season, but each of them does grow individually. While I do think that certain aspects in the second core are kind of slower than they should be, like the second core starts off well, then it kind of slows down and meanders a bit, only to end really strong and have some really good backstory episodes towards the end as well. I can understand people not being as huge on it just because it isn't like perhaps using its time as well as it could be. But as the season was wrapping up, I was very clearly reminded of why I enjoy this show so much. It is such a treat to see this world get expanded on, to see the main characters grow, and I really, really hope that we do eventually get more to continue on with this story, because it deserves it. And now to talk about a show that is not actually done yet in the Apothecary Diaries, and it feels weird to talk about a show that is still ongoing, because theoretically it could completely crash and burn in the second half, but one, I don't expect that to happen, and two, what we have already is already so good, I definitely feel a need to talk about it. And most people have probably heard of the Apothecary Diaries. It is one of the biggest shows of last year. I do think that a big part of the show's appeal does come down to Mao Mao specifically, because she is just such a likable main character, one who has so many interesting personality quirks, who can be really great at solving a mystery and come off as very imposing when she wants to be, but also is, kind of a weirdo as well, and likes eating poisonous things and testing poisonous foods and burning herself and trying out all these experiments, and can also get very easily annoyed and ticked off. There's so many different aspects of her personality that make her such an interesting and just entertaining character to watch. A large part of the enjoyment of the show does come down to her, and I think if you're someone who, for whatever reason, doesn't jive with Mao Mao, you're probably not going to have as good of a time, but if you do, you're going to have a fantastic time, because she makes the show such a charming delight to watch every week. And on top of that, I do think the setting is strong. I think it creates this mystical atmosphere without invoking anything actually supernatural. The animation is very strong and very beautiful. It has great sound, great acting. I mean, it's just a very well-made show. So if you like this type of story, this feudal Chinese setting and this mystery solving and, antics in the imperial court, and just a fantastic main character that I would really be hard-pressed to imagine someone wouldn't enjoy, you owe it to yourself to watch this show. But you probably already are watching it, or at least have planned to watch it, because this is such a big show already, so I don't really need to tell you to try the Apothecary Diaries out. Dr. Stone, Season 3. I think may be contender for anime of the year. They do such a good job of expanding the world of Dr. Stone and really ramping up the stakes, making you want to watch the next episode almost immediately, even though you can't because you're watching it weekly. And it just has me even more excited for the already announced 4th season that will be coming at some point in the future. I did say initially that the first part of the first season was a little bit slow, and I do stand by that. I think it does take a few episodes to really get going. But once it does, man, it is just a non-stop ride to the finish. So many things happen. New characters are introduced and feel genuinely like actual threats. We learn more about what exactly is going on in this world, although there's still plenty of mysteries that need to be solved. And ultimately the characters are kind of pushed to their breaking point. Like there are a lot of instances where even like Senku, despite everything he's able to do and how OP his abilities are, like he really like barely gets by the skin of his teeth. It's just such a fun watch. This is what I feel like shonen anime should be like, where you have these characters you want to root for, villains who feel like a legitimate threat, and proper like outsmarting of these villains at potentially significant cost, while also achieving quite a lot by the end of it. It advances the story in remarkable ways and makes you want to keep watching. What more could you ask for from a 3rd season? And finally, of course, I mean, what else would we be talking about as the 10th show? It is Frieren Beyond Journey's End. Probably the show that the majority of people will say is the best anime of the year. And yeah, I mean, it probably is. I'm not going to definitively say whether it or Dr. Stone or even anything else on this list is best of the year. But I mean, yeah, like it probably deserves that. It's a show that has just done so much right. The characters are likable, Frieren and Fern especially. The world is well balanced. It doesn't feel too cluttered, but it doesn't feel barren. You have the right amount of world building. The world is also just beautiful. I mean, Madhouse has put so much effort into this. It looks beautiful. The animation quality is amazing. The music is amazing. The atmosphere that you're able to craft by utilizing the animation and the music correctly is amazing. Like, this is just such a treat just to sit back and watch. It almost gives you the same sort of vibes as something like an Iyashikei would. Even though it's not, it most certainly is not that, it gives me similar feelings. So of course I'm going to be drawn to a show that does something like that. And ultimately, I think it really takes advantage of its premise, being about this character who is super long-lived and who doesn't really perceive time the same way humans would, who had lost 2 of her traveling companions and really kind of regrets not spending more time with them, but now is going on another adventure, retracing her steps from her original adventure with new companions, and is ultimately reaching towards a very interesting goal of trying to get to heaven, a literal physical place in this world that is heaven. It'll be interesting to see what happens when they actually get there, assuming that happens anytime soon, because the source material isn't done, and certainly we're not going to see that at the end of the anime unless it decides to do like an anime original ending, which I would be very surprised by, and I don't think people would be terribly happy with. But again, we have another instance like Apothecary Diaries where the show is not done. But my god, I would be completely flabbergasted if it somehow drops the ball. It would probably take doing like a really bad ending that, just isn't well written in order to pull that off. I think if it just keeps going as it's going, yeah, it's going to deserve being anime of the year. There's a reason why this show is so beloved, despite the fact that it's not even done yet. This is one of those instances, kind of like Spy Family, where a show gets ridiculously hyped up before it comes out, but it actually deserves it. It is such a good show, and I am very much so looking forward to experiencing more of it as the weeks go on. And there you have my top 10 anime of 2023. Let me know in the comments down below what anime you wish were on this list, what anime you would put on your own list. Again, there are plenty of other really good shows from this year that I did not mention, and if I were to do a top 15 or top 20, I imagine most of the shows that people would want to see on here would be there. These are the shows that stood out to me the most, and the shows that I would recommend the most to anyone who has not seen them. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And until next time, take care everyone. Look forward to the next video.